My name is Patrycja Zwierzyńska.
And what brought you to Akin, and how long have you been here?
I have been here since November of last year, so it's been 4 months.
Really?
And I moved out of a space that I was renting not too far from here. It used to be more of a jewelry studio that I was sharing with a couple other jewelers who ended up leaving, and once they left, I was the only one left in the space, and it just got to be really isolated.
Yeah.
So I had my little corner in the back of a shop, and I was so used to working in kind of a collaborative environment and that kind of thing, and I just really wanted to get back into that. And there was another Akin space in the building that I was in, and I toured that, and then eventually I settled on this one, and I arrived here.
Okay. And where was the Sunny building?
It was a DuPont in Symington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in the Akin DuPont
Is it? Yeah.
building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so can you talk a bit about your practice in general?
So I guess I mostly call myself a jeweler, not in a very traditional sense, although I had some traditional training. And so generally I make really non-traditional, what's called art jewelry. I also do more production-oriented things and sell those lines as well. But I also do some larger sculptural projects, and I collaborate a fair bit on things that are completely unrelated, and I have contract clients that get me to do stuff for them, and so it's just a kind of a mix of all of those things.
Cool. What's your training?
I went to NASCAD in Halifax, so I have a BFA, and I did a major in jewelry design and metalsmithing, and then I started at I got a residency at the Harbourfront Centre in their craft studios as soon as I got out of school, and just went from there.
Were you from Halifax?
No, I'm from here, and then I just went to school there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, NASCAD sounds great.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything about NASCAD in particular that you remember fondly or that you miss?
Oh, I remember so much of it. It's a small school,
Mm-hmm.
and so kind of that community is a really big aspect. The physical buildings of NASCAD, the campus, is incredibly interesting. When I was there, I think they're getting rid of these properties now, but when I was there, it was in like historic properties downtown, and it was not an institution looking building at all. And the only way really you could tell that some sort of institutionalized thing was going on there is that they had lockers in the hallways,
Right.
which looked completely out of place, but it was that was a kind of a big thing.
So were you in a sculpture program?
No, I was in there is a jewelry program.
Oh, okay.
And I actually didn't do sculpture formally at all while I was there.
Okay. And what kind of materials do you enjoy working with most?
So there's metal mostly, a lot of silver, a lot of gold, and lately I've been getting into working with polymer-based things and epoxy-based putties and that kind of stuff, and doing a lot of sculpting and carving.
Okay, and then are you working with molds?
Yes, but mostly for casting.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of lost wax stuff. I don't do it in house. But there's a lot of places in Toronto that you can outsource that to, and so I haven't made many molds recently, just because it's so accessible to get somebody else to do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I do sometimes work with those.
And what do you see as being the benefit of being at Akin for you?
For me, it was this aspect of community and the possibility of collaborating with other people on things either related to what you actually do or not. But yeah, I think that there is a big strength to having other people around when you do something creative, and even just kind of understanding what's going on in a way. Like when I was working by myself, and that was probably only a year, but really I started to feel kind of feral. Like I was just so removed from everything that was happening, and I wasn't, but it really felt that way, and it had that effect. So I think that is a major thing. The other thing, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other thing that I really like about Akin is because I have a fine craft background, and I'm very used to working in studios that are almost exclusively devoted to those mediums. The nice thing about being here is that it is kind of a wider range of things, and it's nice to see the different ways that people work in that aren't sort of always based in like making tactile things or having a lot of equipment and that kind of stuff. It's so it's good to have the wide range of practices around.
Do you think that influences your work?
I think that it probably does in some way, but I think it's more of a quality of life, lifestyle kind of thing that it has the most impact on. So I don't think that it's like I don't know that I would draw a direct link between what the actual physical work ends up looking like and the stuff that I'm looking at around.
Right. And can you talk about that, like the kinds of forms that you're attracted to? Do you have a kind of an arts philosophy or something that guides you in the kind of, or is it more material, or I guess what is it that focuses your art practice for you?
A lot of the stuff that I do is very material driven, but aesthetically I'm really drawn to very organic, natural forms that are relatively abstracted and a little bit ambiguous. So they're things that when you look at them, you kind of have a reference point, and everybody has a slightly different one, but you can't say that is, an exact replica of something that exists. And I like kind of thinking about making things that you don't know where to place. Like you don't know what, like they're of this world, but they don't necessarily belong. And so I like kind of that conversation of not really knowing what it is that you're looking at, but it still evokes the feeling of something else.
Mm-hmm. Does this sort of industrial neighborhood or environment affect your eye, I guess? Do you find living in Toronto that it affects, like, versus somebody working with organic media living in the countryside or being surrounded by trees and nature or by the beach or something? Does it affect you, do you think, being in an urban environment?
I don't know that it affects kind of this aesthetic that I'm focused on. I think, and this isn't what my work has always looked like, okay. But recently it's just kind of been something that I've been interested. So I don't know that the kind of industrial environment has so much of an effect, but I do know that when I leave it does have an effect on me. Mm-hmm. Being in different places and being in rural environments and beaches and that kind of stuff really does sort of shift my perspective.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of able to take that experience and just to kind of live with it while I'm working in a different environment.
So I guess the question about Toronto and being in Toronto at this moment in time, I sense that you have some more political feelings about what's going on in Toronto right now in the art world, and I wondered if you wanted to talk about that in any way.
Well, I've been in several studios now, and the experience of having to move is one that I've had before. Mm-hmm. And do we need to?
Oh, I just wanted to watch.
okay, no, that's fine.
That's fine. We're gonna edit, so
You're gonna edit it?
yeah, sure.
Oh,
We can
maybe
start
not.
over.
I didn't realize, and then I was like, oh shit, they're filming. Can I like be a creep for a minute?
Yeah, I could be a creep.
Groupies all over the place, eh?
Okay, so
okay,
we'll
so
start over
about-
on that question. So we'll start
Yeah.
over on the question of changes that are happening in Toronto right now and your feelings about what's
Yeah.
going on.
My experience has been that I have been displaced from another workspace, and it was something. It was a collective that we had formed and worked on really hard, just did art programming, had studio spaces, had a big space to run events and galleries and our gallery exhibitions out of, and that kind of stuff, and then essentially we lost that space. So I think that was kind of a big blow. And since then, I've kind of been thinking a lot about how accessible that kind of environment is, and it doesn't. And right now, it doesn't feel like it is. It just feels like it's this mass migration of people, and it makes it really difficult to establish something meaningful when you're constantly asked to remove yourself and set up somewhere else and start new. And I don't think that should be something that somebody else has that amount of power over your situation to make happen. And I think that Toronto is a really unique place, and I think that there are a lot of things that go on here, and there are a lot of amazing things that go on here as far as culture, arts, and community is concerned. And I don't always feel like those are fostered at a municipal level or at any larger political level either. Even though the city does talk a lot about how much they appreciate having those things and how attractive that is for people who are visiting the city or who live in the city or who want to live in the city. And so I feel like there's this big disconnect between appreciating those things and having that be something that is really useful for people, but also not having in any way any sort of support that would be able to sustain that. And there is and I don't remember if this is Margaret Mead who said this, but there's a quote that said, "New ideas need old spaces," and I think that Jane
Jacob.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really apt thing. I think that if you want to establish something, if you want to have these environments to work in and to thrive, then there has to be some security around that as well.
Why do you think that is about the old buildings?
I think because that's historically what has happened, right? Is these places were, semi-affordable places that essentially nobody else wanted, right? And so there was a lot of potential, and in my experience, artists are incredibly industrious and are willing to take on these projects when there isn't like a financial compensation involved or anything like that. Like they're just like, okay, we got to do this. We want to take over. We need a space. It's part of what it means, right? And so just having that available, and I think that's where that comes from. And I don't know that it always has to be an old building, but I think that historically it's been places that have not been entirely desirable, and so maybe that's where it comes from. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and I think that's a really good point, that it's what old buildings make possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the desirability or the malleability or not being too attached to whether we keep the floors clean or some space to get messy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's the option, right? The possibilities that are inherent within it, I guess.
Yeah. And do you have that here? You feel like this is available here or has been here in Lansdowne?
I fell in love with the space as soon as I walked into it, and I feel like that is absolutely something that is important to definitely me, a lot of people who are involved with the space, and so I think that's definitely part of it.
Looking ahead to the move to King and Spadina, you're going to go there with the group, are you?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'm wondering about any anticipatory thoughts you have about that, about what that might be like or how that might be different, because my impression is that it's not an old building like this, and although it is slated for demolition, so I suppose that gives some of that same kind of freedom. But do you have any thoughts about what that move could give you as a positive, on the positive aspect, what you could gain, what you could lose from that move?
I love the space that that building offers in what it is. There's a lot of outdoor space. There's a ton of indoor space. There's sort of closed-in spaces because it is because it did used to function as an office. And so I like that it has all of those things, and really the driving factor, even though it isn't a long-term lease again, which would be more ideal, but I feel like that there is this opportunity to be in that place, whereas I don't know that would have been an opportunity had the building not been slated for demolition, which is kind of an annoying paradox, but that's the appeal for me, and so that's what I'm thinking about is if I end up moving there, that this might be the only time, thinking pessimistically, that I will be able to be a part of a space like that that is slightly different than what I'm used to, and that is not this kind of industrial warehouse type of space that I am used to being in and that I really love. But I think so that's the positive kind of aspect, and that's why I'm thinking about it. And so I'm just kind of thinking about it in terms of like we've got this timeline. This is something that is special, and so I'm going to take advantage of it. The downside for me of moving altogether is I do function as a business in a lot of sense, and so the this kind of dismantling of all the equipment, of the entire space, packing it, that takes time. That means that I can't be working as efficiently as I would be if it was just here, and so that costs money. The actual move costs money, and then having to set back up again. And that'll take time as well, and so it's this. I'm annoyed about the interruption of flow, and about the cost that is going to mean.
Absolutely.
Sort of for coming forward.
Knowing that, and that the next space is a short-term lease, does that affect the way you plan ahead for the following year and the likelihood of just doing it again? Yeah,
it does. And so I'm not sure. Because I don't really know what's going to happen, I'm really grateful that Akin is here, and that this isn't something that I'm doing by myself, which I have done before, is look for spaces on my own, and so I am grateful that system is in place, but I also I'm using this time in the new space to figure out what the next plan is, and that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, because it strikes me that you've been through a displacement already where you weren't a member of Akin, and now a displacement where you are a member of Akin. What's the difference between those two experiences?
It feels a little bit less like I'm drowning, which is great, and that is like, to me, that's the collective strength, right? Is that there are many people involved, and there are people that have strengths that they can use, and then there are people that have other strengths that are able to fill that in. And so as we've talked about in the meeting, it's part of Akin's job to constantly be looking for spaces and to have these things available. And so when some sort of emergency happens, there are options, and it doesn't sit completely on your lonesome shoulders to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
So that's the major difference. Like before, when we were displaced, like the collective kind of broke up into smaller groups, and then I ended up looking for something with a smaller number of people. And then those things change as well, but it's a different, having an organization thinking about that stuff versus individuals, small number of individuals who all have the same concerns and the same stresses is different, and it's a lot less stressful.
Do you see a future reality in which artists are not being displaced? It seems to me that the history of art making in Toronto has always involved displacement. And in fact, city building and just the way cities happen involves change and displacement all the time. Communities coming and going, and uses and coming and going. Do you see a future in which that's different, or is there a way that you see that not happening?
Well, I think that there are not enough things in place to allow for incentive to make that happen. And so I think that's, and there are some shifts that are happening kind of on the municipal level that affect arts organizations and art spaces. But I do hope that is something that continues, that people do realize that there is value to having these spaces, and to the people that are using them, and to the city as a whole, because they do provide this kind of this cultural kind of hub or place where that comes out of. So I'm, at the basic level, I'm hoping that there is a shift in thinking, and I really do wish that there was some recourse at least for dealing with it. So I do understand too that displacement and moving is something that is a part of being in a city, but I wish that the people who were affected by it had a little bit more choice over what that displacement would be like, or what that move would be like, and you could decide, when it was going to be beneficial for you to do that, rather than to be told that you have to whenever. So I don't know if that's a good that's a good way of answering, but yeah. So I hope that there's a definite shift in thinking about things like that.
Okay, can you give us a tour of all of your amazing little workshop spaces that you
The
fit
nooks and
into
crannies?
this little
Yeah.
place?
So this is a bench that kind of functions as a surface to do stuff on, and it's kind of like the spillover things. A lot of the time, it's wherever there's space. That's where I put things. But so yeah, this ends up being mostly a place where I write down podcasts that I want to listen to.
Okay. And then this
This
by
is
the
the
window.
place where I eat peanuts. But it's also like I do some beading and that kind of stuff. So anything that's like dry, clean, any kind of wire work that doesn't require patinas or heating or anything like that generally happens here. I also do some drawing and designs and that kind of stuff. And this here behind us is or in front of us, is a really typical jeweler's bench that has some drawers with tools and polishing things and silver. And then this is a drawer that comes out that catches all of your dust and metal scraps and those kinds of things. And then this little area is where you do most of your traditional jewelry work for this huge unit. So there's that, and then this is my soldering station. So my torch is back there. Big oxygen propane tank. This is a heated crock pot that has an acid in it that removes tarnish from metal when you heat it. And what else is there?
And this little.
And this
is
is
a sandblasting?
no, this is a polishing machine for the most part. It's just a lathe motor, has different wheels and abrasives
I see.
and polishing stuff that you can use on
With a
it.
filtration system built in.
And it's got a filter in the back, yeah.
Right.
And that's pretty much it.